Hey y'all, I'm Fantasia. Welcome to my channel, Sewing with Tay. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. If you're new here, I make videos about sewing, learning how to sew, sewing machines, DIYs, tutorials, sew alongs, boy mom life, gym life, starter lock life. If any of that's your cup of tea, subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you will know when I'm making new videos. So, let's get into today's topic. Speaking of boy mom life, I have a son who's itching to get into a YouTube video, and he told me I should make a video with like his face blacked out, like a shadow of him, and call it the sun reveal. He's very dramatic about it. Most kids are, I guess, wanting to be a part of this YouTube life. I guess I am too, but whatever the case. So I might pull him in because I want to try to loop him into some of my creative stuff. So he might join us later in this video. But today's video is about making another chunky crochet blanket sweater. I bought some different knit this time. I have some different learnings this time. So I'm going to try it again and see how it comes out. So, camera, stop shaking. Thank you. So, last time I bought my yarn from Hobby Lobby. I told you guys that. And I ended up using about 16, 17 skeins of yarn. Not the intention. It came out gorgeous. It was really, really big. And I'm like, it could be a little bit smaller. It could be a little bit more defined in some areas. So I went back and I was doing some more research because I originally made the first one on a fluke. Like, I didn't intend to make that into a tutorial. I just made it to see if I could do it. And then I kind of went back. I filmed some of the process for content, but I didn't really film it as a tutorial. So I'm going to try to film this one more specifically as a tutorial. What I learned was I got this from Hobby Lobby. It had 17 of these. I realized in looking, because it was kind of expensive, I probably spent almost $100 on all of the yarn. And this only has 28 yards in it. And I realized that I was price comparing the ones at Joann's, which were more expensive, came with a significant amount more. This has 72 yards. So this is what I will be using for this go around. They seem to be the same thickness, 25 millimeter yarns. I'm going to use fabric, thread, yarn interchangeably because yarn talk isn't necessarily what I do normally. This is something different I'm working on. But this is my new yarn. I got this from Joanne. They're having a Yarntopia or yarn something sale right now, so a lot of their yarn is on sale. So I went and got these, and it took me a couple different stores because everyone did not have more than 2 of these. So I ended up buying 6. I think I only need 5. I bought 6 because I wasn't going back to the store if the sale's over or whatever. But I found these. I'll put a link to this and similar ones in the description so you can find some. I am looking at some different alternatives, but I've heard stories about them like shedding. I don't like to sew stuff that got fluff and that shed, so I don't know how I'm gonna do with those. But I said I was gonna try them out because somebody else was testing it and they wanted to know some feedback. So I said I would try it. We'll see how that goes. But we're gonna start with these. So I am back to my microphone. Here is my yarn. I got my overhead recording going on, so hopefully everything looks good. I'm gonna open this up, and what I've been doing is I unravel like quite a bit of this, and then I put it in like a little bin underneath my table, and I just kind of unwrap it so that it doesn't like roll all over the place. But I pull some off, and then I kind of just put it off to the side and then just kind of pull off a bunch as needed. But we're going to start off at the end with our slip knot. So if you've seen the other video, we're going to do the slip knot really easy. There's your loop. We're going to twist it and pull the yarn that is still attached to the ball through. And then you're going to pull both of those strings till it's tight. You want a kind of a small loop, not too small, but kind of medium size. I don't know, kind of like this. I didn't measure this. So you have the tail, which you want to make sure you have a tail. I'm gonna do it again so that you can see it. Twist, You're going to pull the working yarn, which is the one that is attached to the ball. And then you're going to have a tail that hangs free. Once you get your knot to what you feel like is a good size, we're going to start our like chain stitch. I don't know if that's the official term for this. Again, I'm not a knitter, but that's what I call it because that's what it looks like, a chain stitch. So you're going to take your working yarn, that's the yarn attached to the ball, pull it inside your loop. Now you have a new loop. You're going to put your hands in and pull the yarn through again. You should be counting these loops. I did not say this in my previous video. I specifically kept forgetting to count these loops because this is how many loops you want to make sure you have throughout your whole garment, making sure you're not losing any. I eventually took this out and did it over again because for me it's difficult to know how many loops you have once you've actually finished the chain. So I went back again just to make sure to get apart. And to take it apart, all you have to do is just pull the end of the working yarn and it just pulls right out. So you want to go back in your loop and pull and make your new chain stitch, and you want to count each loop. So 1 and then 2. Each time you pull the yarn through to make a loop, you want to make sure you count it. This chain is going to be the bottom of the hem at the back of your sweater. I have like a 50-inch low hip. So I wanted to make sure that I had a little ease over my backside. So I went for like 25, 26, 27-ish, like for the length of my loops. And it turned out to be 22 loops for me. And with knowing this, I just made a note because sometimes I tend to forget the number as soon as I say it. So I was about 27 when I redid this. I told you guys I took the loops out and redid it a couple times to make sure I had an idea of how many loops that I needed for this. Now we are going to start our first row of loops. So each time this yarn goes over, that's where your loop was in the chain. So always remember to pull your yarn in the direction that you're working in. It just makes it easier to pull through. So I had 22 loops. I don't have a specific science to this, but every time I saw where the yarn went over, that's where I made a loop with my working yarn, which again is the yarn that's attached to the ball of yarn. So I just started counting and making the loops here just to make sure that I had 22. So you're going to flip your yarn the other direction, and then you're going to push your working yarn through the loops and pull them out and make sure that they're relatively around the same size and that you aren't missing any. I felt like I messed up my loop numbers on the first time I did this. So I was very intentional to count my uh, loops every so often to make sure that I didn't miss one, that I didn't drop one, etc., etc. So this was the end of my first row. I'm just going to kind of pull this one out just to make sure that it is even with the rest of them and that it's not too short or not too tight. You see how it's kind of curving down. I think that's mostly because my tension was a little bit too tight. The way that I hand knit this is on the purl side, so I don't actually get to see the knit stitches. So I just flipped this over to give you a visual. I was worried about how this multicolored yarn was going to come out, and it's looking kind of interesting. It's not exactly what I wanted, but they didn't have the colors I wanted. So I knitted all the way from the bottom all the way up. This only ended up being like 20 something inches, but I ran out of yarn there. So I'm measuring here to triple check how much it was. It was 22 inches. So one ball of yarn got me 22 inches of height. So I'm going to show you here what to do when you get to the end of your yarn. You literally just tie it together and you make a knot. Nothing fancy, simple, basic knot. And then you find you a good pair of scissors, because even though I felt like my scissors was good, this fluff, like, disrespecting my scissors, it didn't want to cut. So you literally just cut close to the knot just to get rid of the edges, and then you literally continue to pull the yarn through the loops as you were doing before. I just wanted to give you a close-up of the loops while I was still working on my table. These get too big to stay on the table, so at some point I usually move to the floor. But you can see here, you have your loops. They're all about the same length. You want to make sure that the gap between the loops isn't too big, meaning that you didn't use too much slack in between. You see here, I feel like that length there, that white piece is too wide. So I kind of want to pull the loops a little bit closer so that that center part is smaller. But just making sure they're all relatively the same size. The tension looks about the same. I just wanted to show you that. And also, again, here's another angle of pulling the thread through, pulling the yarn through the loops. This is literally 90% of making these is literally doing this over and over for about 4 hours, 5 hours. Maybe if I was like not distracted, a little less hours. But yeah, this is basically all you have to do. And more of the technical terms, these are purl stitches. This stitch that's going left to right with your working yarn, those are the purl stitches. If you used to flip this over and you see like the chevron kind of look, those are the knit stitches. And yeah, this is me on my table finishing up the row. I feel like this was like right about the middle of the back. Just know this entire piece that you're working on is your back. So trying to figure out what measurement you want it to be. I base mine off of my hip. I've seen people do it based on their shoulder width. So I know that I have a 52-inch hip, which if you was to say I was equally divided, it would be 25 and a half. And this fabric does stretch and grow a little bit because it is knit and it's not like sewn flat together. So it does have some ease. That's how you figure out whichever you want your measurement to be. So this was me getting close to basically my shoulder because you're knitting from the bottom of the garment up to the shoulder, and then we're going to knit down from the shoulder to the hem for the front pieces. So here is my back. It is a whopping 55-ish inches, and those loops there that are still open, this will be where your shoulder is. We are going to split these in half. By split them in half, I mean that we have 22 loops. So I'm going to split them in half. I put a pin, you will see right there in the middle. One side has 11 and the other side has 11. So I'm going to continue to loop only on one side. So there's the end, and then we're going to start making the rows, but only on one side. This here, this point where we're at, is the shoulder. So now we are starting to knit down the front of the body. So we started at the back hem. We're going to go all the way up and then into the front panel. So here I am just doing the same thing, continuing to knit one side of the front. And I basically want to make sure, same difference, that the other side, I'm not touching them, I'm not losing them. So I actually folded this in half at the shoulder so I would know how far down this front panel needed to go to meet the bottom of the back panel. So you'll see here, that's where they line up. And these are my loops at the end. I'm going to show you how to cast off to finish them. Yeah. So basically, what you gotta do is, and it took me a couple chances to get this, so I'm gonna try to explain it real slow. You're going to take your working yarn, it's attached to the ball, and you're going to make a loop. Again, I don't want this to be too tight. You don't want it to be too tight. So you're gonna make another loop in the second loop. And then you're going to take the first one and put it over the second one. Take your working yarn, put it into the third loop. Then take that second loop and put it over the third loop. And you're just going to keep doing this all the way to the end. That first loop that you started with will always go over the loop you just created. And you're going to feed it over back and forth all the way till you get to the end of your garment. Casting off kind of looks like a French braid, so it'll look kind of like this. And then once you get to the end, you're going to loop that last one over. You get a braid just like that, sorry. But you're going to loop it over. Then you're going to take your working yarn and you're going to cut it. But remember to cut it with a little bit of a tail just in case something go wrong. And I felt like I needed one more loop there. So I just threw that in there. So here's your loop. There's your working yarn. Oh, wait, there's more. I thought I was done. I'm sorry, guys. I thought I had already did this part, but maybe not. So we are almost done. There's one or two more loops here. So there's a loop there. You're going to put your working yarn in, and then you're going to pull the yarn before it over the top to secure it. Cut the yarn like so, like that. And then we are going to take the end of that yarn and loop it through the hole. And then you're just going to pull it tight. And I'm real self-conscious. I put 2 holes in it, but that's just my business. So yeah, you're going to make the hole and make a knot at the hole at the bottom of the garment, and then you're just going to knot it. So here you see we only worked on one side. This is the other side that we did not work on. We have one front, we need the other front. This is how we do the other front. So we are going to just make a loop, and we're just going to put it in there. I would go back and make a knot and tie this in there just to make sure it is correct. It is important to know I decided to fold my garment in half so that the right side is facing up and my pearl stitches are facing me. You have to remember to continue to loop your yarn in the same direction you've been doing this. Otherwise, you will have pearl loops on one side and then knit stitches on the other. So my pearls are facing up, they're facing me. So I'm going to continue to weave in the yarn the way I was doing previously. So you just keep pulling, and that first thread was kind of loose. So I had to kind of tighten it. But yeah, you literally just pull it through. You make some new loops, pull it through, and then you count to make sure you have the right amount of loops. And then you also want to triple check and make sure that direction, your knit direction is going the same way. And here's my son. He wanted to come and help, and I kind of showed him how to do it, and he got it. It is pretty simple. An 8-year old can do it. And he struggled a little bit with the loops, and I did too the first time because sometimes they get a little lost. But he did a really good job of pulling them in there. He does move a little bit slow. I had to, like, all right, I'm going to finish this up. But he did a good job of coming in and trying to help and learning how to do something new. He was definitely getting distracted by the iPad. I'm like, focus, friend, focus. But he did a good job. And he was able to get through a couple rows before he was like, okay, I'm done. Here are my knit stitches. I did end up with 2 different colors. So I want to show you guys how to put in the colors. If you wanted to be one of the people who do multiple colors, you change colors or add colors the same way you tie on a new thread. So if you used to run out of if you run out of yarn, you're just going to tie it on the same way we did the other way. So you see how my bottom here had a black thread in it, the top did not. I didn't realize that when I bought it, but I was like, yo, here we are. So if you were doing like a color blocking situation, you add your new color in the same way. You can make a tie, you can tie it and cut it off and just keep continuing, or you can like make a loop like we did at the shoulder and like knot it so that it doesn't come out and do that the same way. So yeah, hopefully this video so far is a little bit better than the last one. I did do some things differently here, and I hope I explained them so that they're clearer. I had the 2 different colors here that was not done intentionally. They were so close, I didn't realize they were different when I bought them, but I wasn't going back. So here is my front and back pieces all knitted up. I'm going to do the cast off method here at the bottom, just like I showed you on the other side, and you'll get your little braid detail. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I ended up being like 52 inches, but I could probably stretch this out a little bit and it would probably be 55. So let's talk sleeves. I planned on stopping my sleeve or starting my sleeve at 12 inches from below the shoulder. So we first have to link the sides together and then we're going to sew a continuous circle for the sleeve. So to do that, I wanted to get a piece of yarn that is the length of whatever the distance is from below the 12 inches for your sleeve to the hem times like 3. So mine was like 40 inches. I did like a 120-inch piece of yarn, and that you're going to cut off the ball. You just need a long piece of yarn, and you're going to thread it back and forth between the front and back layer at the side seam. So I'm doing a little fitting. You can't see the whole thing right now, but I just want to see how long to make the sleeves. So like from elbow to here, I'll measure that length and decide how long my sleeve width needs to be. And then once we get the sleeves on and the sides together, we'll be done. So I have my front and my back pieces together. I have my long piece of yarn. I'm going to get the end, and literally I'm just grabbing two random loops, like whatever's closest to the edge. But I'm grabbing two random loops, I'm sticking my yarn through there, and I'm doing like a double knot, triple knot, make sure that it's super tight to hold the pieces together. And then continuing up the side seam. So you have to pull your long piece of yarn through the garment back and forth. I'm just going to find two loops that are close to the edge, and then I'm going to pull my yarn through and pull it all the way tight. I later started pulling from like the middle of the yarn so that I didn't have to pull so much from the end. But yeah, you're just going to find a yarn loop on the top and the bottom, and then you're going to put your thread through. I tried to zoom in here. Put your thread through so that it will be like a stitch, like a regular whip stitch or something, if you're a sewer or a sewist. So you're literally going to pull through and then pull tight and then move on to the next loop. You are going to continue to do this up until you get to your sleeve. Again, I put a pin there so I knew exactly where I needed to stop, but you're going to start to knit your sleeve in a circle. So you're going to loop this back and forth until you get to the pin, and then let's start the sleeve. There is no particular rhyme or reason for me here, but maybe somebody else has one. You can see there, I have a little clip that tells me where I need to stop. And then once I get there, I will start making loops for the sleeve. You're going to start making loops on whichever side, the front or back. You're going to start making loops, and then you're going to make loops all the way around to the other side, whether it's the front or the back. So here I am at my pin. I'm going to eventually take the pin out, and then I do want to make sure that my linking is tight, but not too tight. So you look there, there's the inside of your sleeve. This is the outside of your this is the inside of your sleeve facing you. The outside of the sleeve is inside there. So I just started making loops. So you see how that yarn twist over my mind, that's where the loops are. So you're gonna take your working yarn, the one that you used to link. You're not getting any more new seams. This is why we have such a long piece. This is the yarn that was from the linking at the side seam, and that's linking is linking the front and the back together. So you're just gonna go find these loops, these spaces here, and you're going to make a loop. And this is still using that same yarn. You're going to loop all the way through, all the way till you get back to the bottom of what would be your sleeve opening at your side seam where your linking is. It would be really helpful if you wanted to count your loops here. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I did not count the loops on my sleeve. So you have your sleeve, you have your loops. I did run out of yarn, so I had to tie on some more, and you're going to make loops. Again, with the message from before, you need to make sure your purl stitches are going in the same direction. So if your purl stitches are facing you, you want to make sure they're facing you, not on the bottom or the inside, which meant for me that I have to take my yarn and pull it from basically the outside in, and you can't go from the inside out. You have to put the yarn behind the loop and pull it to the front. And I made that mistake before on the red one the first time, so that's how I knew not to do that again. Mind you, I didn't get very far when I realized, like, oh, this looks different. How you would know that it's different, you will start to see knit stitches, or it kind of looks like a chevron stitch. You will see that facing you. So when you're looking at the garment you're working on, you will see a different stitch than this purl stitch that everything else has. That's how you know they're not matching. So you're just going to continue to pull your thread in the hole and then out, in and then out. And I decided once I got here that there was a gap here, and I'm like, I need to make another loop. Don't feel like you have to be stuck with the amount of loops. You could always add more or take them away. I felt like this needed one more loop. So now I'm just going to continue going around the circle, pulling the loops. I decided I needed 12 inches for the sleeve. I ended up only doing like 10 and a half because I was tired. I'm like, okay, y'all, I'm tired of hand knitting, and I don't even know if anybody's going to buy this. But here we are. So here's my sleeve. I wanted to double check and make sure that, I'm not missing any loops. And I wanted to double check the length to make sure that it's measuring close to what I wanted it to be. So now I'm going to start with casting off, just like we did on the hem of the garment at the front. So we are going to make a loop, and then we're going to make another loop, and then we're going to put the first loop over the second loop, and then we're just going to continue to do that. Make a third loop, put the second loop over the third, and then we're just going to do that and go all the way around. So finishing up the sleeve, I'm going to finish off the cast off, and then once you get to the end, you're going to cut your working yarn, and then I made a couple knots here. I just wanted to double knot it, also make sure that I didn't pull it too tight. So we're going to knot it again, and then I'm just going to make the tail a little bit shorter, and then I'm going to kind of weave it inside of the design. And I'm also going to do that for the areas like the hem and at the shoulder. So here is the full look. I'm gonna try to get some close-ups because it's hard to find a place in my studio to have um a full body image video in this format. So there is my sweater. It was super easy to do. It is very cozy, very soft. It is like a very plush rug or something. Like, I could sleep on this. I could sleep in this. It is very nice. I think I'm going to add these to the things that I like to make just because they're fun and something different than what I normally do. Thank y'all so much for watching my video as I went along to make this chunky knit sweater again. This time I made it a lot less big than the other one. A lot less, I don't want to say a lot less chunky because I feel like it's still a very chunky sweater. It's just not as big as the red one that I made in the last video. This one I only used 5, not even 5. I used like 4 and 4 whole ones and like a half of like that other color that I bought. So I used about 4.5, almost 5 of those. Those came with 75 yards. And I think the math that I was doing was about, oh gosh, I'm forgetting. I think the math was 350 yards is what 350 yards of yarn. So if you find other yarn and you're trying to figure out how many um, how many you need to buy. I roughly use 350 yards for that. I consider myself a 2X, like a size 18-20. So that's how much yarn I used. For reference, the red style was 28 yards in a bundle, and I used 17 of those. So whatever that math was compared to five, roughly 5 bundles, five skeins of yarn at 75 yards. So that's the difference in the amount of yards that I used. So I want to thank y'all so much for watching my video. This has been my best video so far on YouTube, so I appreciate that. And hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. I'm trying to be more consistent. If there's other things you want to see me attempt to make, please leave me a comment, send me a message. I will see them. And yes, good night. Thank you and enjoy. Stay warm, y'all. It's -1 degrees in Ohio today.